And we're going to just have a round fast. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm telling everyone they have to answer quick. So my first question is, President Trump, in his wisdom, has asked the U.S. Congress to allocate $1.6 billion in the next budget year to restart a manned moon mission with the idea of putting people on the moon by 2024, which, by the way, is the date that he will still possibly be president. And so that seems to be his pyramid. Does everybody, if you were an American congressman, would you vote yeah, no, or some other answer? And by the way, this is $1.6 billion probably per year for the duration of the thing. So it could be $6, $7, $8 billion in total. Is that a good idea to do?
I would vote yes, no military uses, 1/2 to 2/3 allocated to competitions.
Okay, there we go. Allocate part to competitions. Good. Ollie?
Well, if we're going to imagine this, I think we're going to have to imagine me as a Democratic member of Congress. And for a mission that would take place during a campaign to elect President Pence, no, I would not want to do that. But I would, in general, probably quite favor $1.6 billion going to the moon, as long as it had a rider saying that NASA should stop building its own rockets.
Okay. Holly, should NASA stop building its own? Well, answer the question. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll start by answering the question. So luckily for everyone, I'm not a politician, I'm a NASA engineer. And of course, it's part of my responsibility to get us back to the moon by 2024. And so I would vote yes.
Okay.
So first I want to correct you. As NASA published a picture, we are on the surface of the moon. We've got to the surface in too many pieces, but we're still there. And I just want to stress out that $1.6 billion a year can make you about 20 missions like we did, robotic missions to the surface of the moon. So I will do yes, but I encourage the robotic aspects of those missions because you can do a lot more with robots, you can take a lot more risk, and it's a lot more fun on the moon.
Okay, there are two guys who are billionaires that are currently having a private space race. Whoever, I mean, the idea of this 20 years ago, two private individuals racing to the moon would have seemed far-fetched, and yet we have it, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. Jeff Bezos could probably write a check every year for the next 5 years for $1.6 billion if he were so inclined. Elon Musk has got a going business that's doing this. Is this further Ollie's thing? I mean, is this best left to Xprize and private enterprise, or I mean, what should be the relative roles of the public and private sector? Given what we know now, 50 years after Apollo, we've learned quite a bit. So given that the technologies have changed, there's more off-the-shelf stuff, you don't have to invent everything from scratch. How does it play out? Same thing, go down.
I mean, I believe that there is room for government and private sector collaboration. I think there is value to be gained. That's why I was talking about competitions, because you want to draw innovation out of the private sector and make sure that these technologies can become sustainable over time, so it doesn't become just the job of NASA to make sure it continues to evolve and grow. And bringing the private sector in will ensure to do that.
Okay. Ollie?
I think it's difficult. I mean, when I say that I don't want NASA making rockets, that doesn't mean I don't want NASA sort of like flying rockets. I just think that the system that we've seen that Holly's administered and run, whereby private companies make things that go up to the space station on a contract basis, has worked very well and has delivered for the American taxpayer.
Well, so is that in effect what's happening already?
Well, that's what's happening in terms of getting now cargo and later crew to the space station. So I think that's the sort of way it's going to be going. But that doesn't mean I don't want there to be involvement of governments and not just the American government,
right.
Because I don't want, great though my admiration in some fields may be for Mr. Bezos and Mr. Musk, I don't want something as common to the human experience as the moon in the hands of couple of rich West Coast Americans. Hey. That's not my vision of the future.
Holly.
All right, so first of all, my day job is to be in Houston, Texas, and responsible for the operations of the International Space Station, which is one of the best examples of collaboration with other sovereign countries, European Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency, and then, as was pointed out, we bring commercial vehicles to the space station. NASA has partnerships, and so, you know, we're going to the moon in 2024, and we need everyone to be excited about it and bring what they can do best in order to make that work. And so some of that is going to be countries, and some of that is going to be commercial partnerships. And so Anousheh used the word collaboration. We do that today, and we need to continue to do that, and I'm excited about it.
Yonatan.
I think there's a difference between what's cool and what's important, and in the space area there's stuff that is cooler to do and there's stuff that is more important to do, and I think government and rich people building their own rockets have different...
You guys are cool.
Yeah, Spaceil, for example, you know, we did something that is very cool to get to the moon. We use it to inspire kids, which is also important. But
What did it cost?
$100 million.
Okay, over 10 years?
Over 8.5 years.
Okay.
So I think there is a place for both of them. They have just different roles in it.
Okay, here's backtrack just ever so slightly. Of course, immediately when this announcement was made, the various people who don't like space programs came out of the woodwork and said, usually some variation of two things. Either, didn't we do that already 50 years ago, why should we do it again? Or, can't we just send a bunch of robots and dig up the minerals or whatever it is we want on the moon? What do you say to people who say things like that?
So I believe we should go back to the moon to stay. I think we should build a permanent base where we can do experiments, where we can learn. If we want to go further to Mars and beyond, we need to be able to understand what it means to live in space.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we should go back to the moon, not to go and dig up moon.
Okay, Ali?
I think you always have to be careful when you use the word we, because the United States in the 1960s went to the moon for a very specific purpose, which was to signal quite what a national investment it was willing to make in a technological area. And that's something that America doesn't need to do now. So it's not like, it's comparing what's going to happen to Apollo is not comparing like with like. But I think for me, what I want to see happen on the moon is a greater diversity of experience. And to be fair, Pence said in his speech in Huntsville that, you know, specifically putting an American woman on the moon. But I want to see people on the moon from more countries and cultures than that, and I want to see them in different parts of the moon. There's a wonderful thing about the moon is that in terms of landscape, the Earth is to the moon what the moon is to the Earth. It lights up the sky at night. And I want to see people look out at a landscape lit only by the Earth and find out what that feels like.
Okay, Ali?
So I certainly think that going to the moon will be very different this time, right? The ecosystem of space has grown tremendously. I mean, you've got these folks sitting up here very different than when NASA did it before. And the barrier to entry to participation, again, another good example, very, very different. And so there's a lot of opportunity involved in going to the moon. And I very much agree with the going back to stay statement. For many, many purposes, certainly just for the human race to be inspired together, and also to figure out what we can do, how we live and work, and whether that's companies or whether that's just to look out and see it.
So I guess I should hide because I'm in the robotics camp. I think that you can do a lot with robotics, especially with the advancements with AI and virtual reality, that you can do a lot of look and feel about what is going to be on the moon. You can do it a lot more cheaply. It can be a lot more accessible, that anyone can take part of it, where human spaceflight is not there just yet.
Okay, now the really evil question, moon versus Mars. Okay, like Elon Musk, for instance, has said, moon, who cares? Nothing there of interest. Skip it. What do you think?
Well, I think I want to go to moon, Mars, and beyond. And I don't think we can go anywhere until we actually understand what it means and what it takes to go further than the moon. And we do that only by going to the moon first. So I'm a proponent of that. Robotics will play a role. We need to understand how to use material on the surface of the moon to build stuff and be able to create circular systems so we can live there without taking everything with us. So with 3D printing, robotics, AI, machine learning, all of these things is what we need, and we need to practice on the moon and then go beyond.
Holly? Oh, sorry. Ali.
I'm really kind of an Earth guy, and on that basis, I kind of slightly say both because they talk about the Earth in two very different ways. Mars is really potentially, in a way, a world like the Earth. It has air and wind and clouds and ice and water under the ground. It's a world. It flows. It moves. The Moon is an unworld. It's really beyond the deadest of the dead. There's nothing, and so the Moon gives you a contrast to the Earth, and Mars gives you a way of learning about an alternative to the Earth. And those are both, to me, very valid as long as we keep the focus on the Earth. In practical terms, going to Mars is really hard. Flourishing on Mars is incredibly hard. Going to the Moon is not that easy, but it's not as hard as it used to be. And so I think it's quite clear that people will go there sooner and in much larger numbers.
Holly?
So I think about it a little bit technically, where right now we fly in low Earth orbit, and that's one set of technical problems to understand with our astronauts that are 250 miles above the Earth. And then after that, we're going outside of low Earth orbit. And so going to the Moon makes a lot of sense, where we teach ourselves how to solve those problems. Again, we did it before on a very small scale, and so headed back to the Moon, we're going to teach ourselves how to work together, how to put together all the robotic human partnerships, the commercial government partnerships, and solve the really hard technical problems, and then as a jumping off point, keep going to the Mars and beyond.
I think, in a sense, Mars is the new Moon. You know, Mars today is the Moon in the 60s. It's a target out there that you need to get to, and it's really exciting. But I think that from an added value point of view, getting to the Moon has actually a lot more potential of changing how we do space flight, about how we do science, about the stuff that we can learn. And eventually getting to Mars is important, but there's so much value left on the table on the Moon.
Okay, so now we're going to go to individual questions for each of you. First, Anousheh. You guys have prizes for all kinds of stuff. Tell us, we have an audience full of people who are potential competitors. What's your top 6 favorite Xprizes right now?
So I'll start with the
Very
one.
fast.
Yes, I'll start with the one that you can still register for. That's our Avatar Xprize, and registration closes end of September. It requires experiences in robotics, AI, and machine learning, sensing to bring an avatar to life where you can control it and sense everything remotely. We have an AI for good. 30 finalists competing for bringing AI and machine learning.
How much?
It's 15 million for AI for good, 20 million for Avatar. We are launching prizes in the area of health and
Any space stuff?
space stuff. We're working on looking at cleaning up the debris, space debris. We're looking at alternatives.
Does that include them?
Not
We're
on the
a monument.
surface, orbital debris. And also looking at new propulsion system potentially. We're looking at education, food and agriculture.
So anybody can go to xprize.org
Please
and
come to
say there's a list.
xprize.org, yes.
Okay. Ali, in researching this book, what was the most amazing thing that you learned about the Moon?
Oh, good Lord. What is the most amazing thing I learned about the Moon?
It was something startling that you didn't really expect.
Well, there's an idea about how the Moon formed in which there is an entire torus called a synestia spiraling around the core of the Earth, in which it's raining silicate rocks down within the torus. And it's that the Moon is accreting out of that. And the most extraordinary thing I learnt was that we may have seen that sort of process already taking place around another star. There's a sign around one other star that looks as though an impact as huge as the impact that formed the Moon is going on right there now. So that I think was quite extraordinary.
Okay, Holly, at NASA, not necessarily speaking for yourself, but speaking for NASA as a group, Moon versus Mars.
So definitely the Moon, right? I mean, we've talked about it. We're going to the Moon. That's what we're charged with.
Is there like a little cluster of Mars maniacs at JPL or something that won't give up?
So we definitely like Mars, but I mean, we've talked about, again, going to the moon, learning, and as a jumping off point. So I think in general, we like space and all of the planets, and we would love to find out more about all of them. But right now, you know, the energy and the focus and the excitement and is all focused on
Actually, and since I'm going to have to ask you too, because you're the only real person to talk about this one. Space station, ISS, the space station. What's the future of the space station?
So the International Space Station, right, amazing. And if you think about the future of it, we've got many years ahead of us. And so there's still some discussion at home about how many years exactly that's going to be. From my perspective, as the person responsible for operating it and keeping it safe for the crew members, it is just full steam ahead, right? We are integrating new commercial crew vehicles, right? So we have commercial providers that are building the first crew vehicles that we've seen done that way. And so we also are partnering with many other folks to use the space station as a platform to teach ourselves about going to the moon. So it feels like full speed ahead from
As a kind of like highway rest stop on the way to the moon?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope so.
Okay.
So the orbital mechanics doesn't quite work out very easily, but you know, I think it'd be great.
I'd like to do a shout out because this class of astronauts this year, 50% women. So
Oh
shout
wait,
out.
you've been in space. I forgot.
Yes.
I totally forgot.
How could you forget
Wait a
she's been in
second.
space?
Anousheh, actually, tell us quick, what did you do?
I did 4 experiments with the European Space Agency because I flew with the Russians, but it was incredible because I learned how important it is to collaborate in space, and that's why I think one of the biggest lessons our world leaders can learn is that collaboration. So I keep saying, let's send the next group from UNGN or the G20 to space station.
Did you have a spiritual experience?
What's
the word? Overview?
Overview effect.
Okay.
Yes, I don't think you can help but have an overview effect because you are looking at the world with a new lens, and everything that's important sort of stands out and comes to focus, and our planet is at the center of it.
Okay. Yonatan, are you guys going to do it again? Are you going to do something else?
Yeah, so we announced that we're going to attempt doing Bereshit number 2, the next moon lander, and
what's going to be different?
we're going to fix the problems that we discovered in the previous one.
But it's not a completely different...
No. So we want to add a scientific experiment, some more payloads that we can do, and we're going to approach the community to ask what would you like to be on the moon and what we can take with us. We're now in the process of starting the new project, and I'm hoping that we can announce full steam ahead pretty soon.
And one of the reasons that I say competitions, because if you ask him all the engineering reasons that they had to make the Bereshit to smaller, lighter, all these things are things that when you're a private company you have to deal with. And that's why competition is good, because it forces people to really solve engineering problems that if you're part of the government agency you may not have to.
I want to tell a little story. So the Xprize, the Google Lunar Xprize that we started off.
You started as competitors.
Yeah,
in that.
we were the last team to register for the competition and the first one to hit the moon. But apart from that, the competition was for $20 million. We ended up investing $100 million in donations. So the fact that they set up this competition actually encouraged us to go ahead and take a stab on it. And out of momentum, we actually...
So you're going to use the prize money? They got an extra prize, right?
We provided a moonshot award of $1 million.
Even because they had passed the expiration date of the prize.
Yes.
But you got a consolation. So you're going to use that $1 million to finance the next one?
So that's part of the... what we want to do.
Okay. Again, we're a tech conference here. We've probably got lots of startup people out here. This might not be a question for Ali, but maybe if you can take a stab at it. What do we need entrepreneurs like Holly at NASA? Like, what would you love entrepreneurs to be working on right now that would help you guys do your jobs better, other than the rockets that Elon's building?
Yeah, so again, if you talk about space, there's lots of problems to solve. So, I mean, we were talking about robotics and in the back room, you know, what is different from flying in low Earth orbit like we do in the space station to going to the moon and flying outside of low Earth orbit? The communications are different. We do a lot of the work of the space station from the ground today, sending commands and communicating almost in real time with the crews. And so people need to think about that. We've got emergency scenarios where once you get to where we are sustainable on the moon, folks are going to have to, humans are going to have to be able to take care of themselves. So all of those type of, we'd say the word contingency, but backup systems are going to have to be rethought in that remote outpost in a way that we've never really seen.
Okay, Anousheh, I mean, where would you guys be looking to put?
So I think, you know, again, creating habitats out of material on the surface, 3D printing them, recycling
So
them.
in other words, let's assume the thing is going to work and it's by 2024 we're going to be there, we're going to need someplace to stay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Building everything from material on the surface as much as possible and making sure that we have closed systems. These things not only will help us to sustain life on the moon and beyond, but also will help us here on Earth because we're looking for ways to have circular systems that will allow us not to deplete our resources
Got
here.
it.
So I think that's why these research are important.
I mean, you need a supply chain that doesn't go all the way back to Earth every time you need something because it's very expensive and it takes a long time. So kind of thinking
I'm going
about
to
it
give
from that
Ollie the last
standpoint.
word.
Wood. I think you should work out ways to use synthetic biology to make wood. Wood is a great building material, and also that's the essence of what you want to be doing. You want to have life, not just humans, but life on the moon, and wood would be a great place to start. So that's my startup.
Has there
Lunar
ever been
wood.
any, Holly, has there ever been any wood in a NASA vehicle?
Not that
Like
I
a
can
steering
think of
wheel or
offhand.
something, or-
Wood tends to burn, and burning in space is not a good
Ollie,
scenario.
you're in trouble.
No, the Chinese used to use cork as a heat shield material, but I agree that the other stuff burns in
Balsa
space
wood.
too.
Lots of models made out of balsa wood. Okay, look, on that zero, I have been yelling at people all day to stay on time, so I can't let this go any further. So you guys have been great. Thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.